It's one of the greatest ballets ever created.
Swan Lake is a huge honor and a huge responsibility.
You can't go halfway with Swan Lake.
Carolyn Kane is one of the biggest international ballet stars ever.
I am directing for the first time. Left side, left arm. I have to feel so brave to do this.
Swan Lake, that's definitely been always somehow my ballet. I do expect to dance as a Swan Queen.
Everyone wants to honor the tradition, but racism isn't a good tradition.
Ballet, it's like my angel, but it's also like my demon.
Every day we're balancing on the tip of a razor blade.
This is this.
Thank you for all the stress you've endured and for all the tears you've cried. They mean a lot to me.
Hi everyone, welcome to this new episode of Carolyn Talks. I'm your host, film critic and journalist Carolyn Hines, and this is the podcast / YouTube channel where I talk to film creatives about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And this is one of my interviews for the 2023 Toronto International Film Festival, where I get to talk to filmmakers Sean O'Neill and Chelsea McMullan about the documentary Swan Song, which I'm actually very excited to talk about because it's one of my favorite films from the festival, genuinely. Hey. I had a ball with this film in the cinema because it was unexpectedly very funny. And I love the humor comes through because of the things the subjects in the film say, and also like, their reactions. And I was just like, yeah, if it was me in this situation, I would react totally the same way. So I love that the film is very serious and very chaotic, but also very funny. So it's about the Swan Song, pun fully intended, of Prima Ballerina Carolyn Kane, who was the artistic director of the National Ballet of Canada, which is located here in Toronto. So I was glad to get to see an inside look of the academy, because I go downtown all the time and I even know one of the places where they go to rehearse, which is close to the waterfront. So I was like, I get to take a look inside the building. So it was cool to get that perspective, and it was cool to get to see a different side of the ballet industry and the ballet community. So first, I want to just tell you congratulations, because I know shooting a documentary is not easy. And you guys did this, I think, about 2.5 years because COVID and the lockdown interrupted filming. So, like, first of all, congratulations to you and your entire team for like sticking with it and making it through that with, I think, an extremely well done film. So, yay!
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Yes,
it was hard. It
was very hard.
I can only imagine, like, just filming a regular quote unquote documentary is hard, but filming one where you have to work around dancers. And the production is, especially one on the scale of this show, I can only imagine logistically was a nightmare. And
Thank you for noticing.
You're really, really right.
Yes.
So talk to me first about just wrapping your own minds around the logistics of filming this. Once you decided, okay, this is the topic we're going to follow. These are the subjects, Karen and the other dancers of the company. Tell me about just wrapping your heads around the logistics and figure out how are we going to actually get this done?
Yeah, that's a great question.
That's a great and big question.
I mean, it was sort of a question that was never answered. We just had to keep going day by day. I will tell you that quite a few experienced producers told us when we were starting this that we were out of our minds because of the complexity. It's like you're dealing with multiple unions, you're dealing with dancers, you're dealing with an orchestra, you're dealing with all of the different sort of departments at the ballet, and you're dealing, it's just sort of like the people who were involved and who kind of could put, blocks up to access, or the costs of doing it, or just like entering an institution with extremely entrenched practices and like hundreds of years of history and trying to get them to do something that, you know, is kind of anathema to their art form, which is like showing the raw kind of pain that goes into creating something so beautiful, talking about all the problematic elements of an art form that's like wrapped up in all kinds of ideals, be they about whiteness, be they about body type, be they about like, you know, ways of performing kind of as a citizen and compliance and all of the things that, you know, one of our experts talked about the Core de Ballet being about. It was just like endlessly challenging from a production standpoint. And then, I mean, Chelsea like can talk a little bit about how hard it was even just to shoot and capture.
Yeah. And then there's sort of like the way that we wanted to approach it. Like what Sean and I were both really excited about was this idea of shooting something that kind of had an organic arc, something we would follow, something unfolding in real time, that we would have a more verite approach to that. And, you know, that it would be sort of multi-character. So yeah, that's like a lot of ambitious things at the same time to try to actually execute from a production standpoint and from a post standpoint, because we shot over like 500 hours of footage.
Everything like miking dancers, cameras in the studios, learning the choreography, like the physical intensity, being there 10 hours a day. Like our two cinematographers lost 25 pounds each over the course of 3 months just chasing dancers.
Yeah, I remember they said, because I attended one of the screenings with the Q&A and they were there, the cinematographers, I think one of the editors, and they talked about that.
Oh, you're at that one.
Everyone in the audience was like, whoo! I was just like thinking, just like, wow, like that's so much work. But I'm glad you mentioned that, Sean, because one of the things about this film that I'm so happy that you guys really worked on showing the underbelly of the beast of ballet is that when in looking at films that have portrayed ballet on screen, like Center Stage is one of my favorite films. And like I constantly think about that scene on the scene where she's like dancing in the red and everything and Michael Jackson is playing. But it's about Hollywood has this perception of ballet being about young, nubile dancers, you know, fitting in this very perfect ideal. But one of the things I love about this film is like one of the main characters, Georgita, who's the principal of ballet. She's older, she's more mature. You can see her maturity and her strength in her body. We see her working out and pushing weights. And I love that we get to see these women being shown as being physically strong. They're not delicate at all. And I think that's important of dispelling myths people have of ballet, you know, of dancers just in general. Like they have to be so strong. And like one of the girls said, like her pedometer was measuring, they ran like 5K in 1 hour. Just one act of one rehearsal. And they're doing that like that's an act 4 of one run round. So like they're doing that multiple times a day. And I'm like, most Olympic athletes don't even run 5K in like that's like a 20-minute block of rehearsal. And like that's just ridiculous. And I love that you took the time to show us how physically strong these girls are. So talk about showing that aspect of it, because I think that's one of my favorite parts of it, is showing they're not delicate, they're not frail. Like you gotta have a extreme determination to pursue this career, to say I want to be a ballet dancer. Like you got to literally break your bones, break your feet, distort your body, destroy your body to pursue this idea of perfection.
Yeah, I'm glad that was all coming through for you. I mean, it was just kind of like, I think ultimately our goal was just we wanted it to be real, like a real representation of what it takes, not only to be a dancer at this level, which is like, you know, classical ballet. You know, it's like, it's very, very difficult. And then on top of that, Swan Lake is a very difficult classical ballet. And then on top of that, Karen's version was particularly like a difficult version of Swan Lake. So what they're being asked to do is something that even in the most arduous art form, like physically arduous and mentally arduous, like they're also like, they're sort of even pushing past that into something even of the scale that like they haven't really done before physically and mentally. So it's just asking so much of them. And so we just really wanted to feel that and feel the artistry of it and like how much they push themselves. And then also the sort of like they're also like incredible athletes. So it's like, yeah, it just didn't feel like, it's often represented in a way that we were sort of seeing unfolding in the studio. Like, I think, there's the body horror and the sort of the black swan of it all. But yeah, to really show it as it is and sort of in sort of a real way, was like the thing that we were sort of chasing.
Yeah, it was like the reason we wanted to do it. And like, one thing I'll say too is like in doc, it's a really amazing thing when you have a subject that actually comes with a lot of baggage, like ballet, because everybody's seen Black Swan and Center Stage, and some people have seen The Company, which is like our favorite ballet film.
I've actually never seen Black Swan.
Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. Well, Black Swan is like body horror to the max, and psychological torment. So,
I've seen the clips,
everybody's walking in.
Like, what it is, even though you've seen it. Yeah, we all know what it is.
You've seen the trailer, you're fine. Yeah. But everyone's like walking in with this, like, this baggage. And so that's such an opportunity as doc filmmakers to be able to say, okay, yeah, but like also here's what it's really like. And for us, the key to that, part of the benefit of the pandemic delay was we had 2 years to develop really real and sincere and intimate relationships with our subjects. So when the time came to really shoot, they were willing to go there with us and to share the struggles and the obstacles. And for each of them, Tanae included, like, there's something about the world of ballet that feels almost impossible to reach. And, it's a kind of both indicative of what that world is like, but it is also kind of a broader allegory for like what it means to kind of be an artist, to try to fit into the world and try to reach for something beyond yourself and try to grow. And, how much is too much? Like, all of these questions became so rich to us as we were watching it all unfold.
You mentioned Tanae, and that's someone I really want to talk about, because me being Black and being dark skinned, when I was a little girl, I dreamed of being a ballet dancer. There was a school actually like 5 minutes walk from my house, and I would walk down from primary school and I could pass it to go to my house, and I go and see the girls, like dancing, or they went before they had lessons Sundays, they'd come to school and they change at school into their tights and their shoes, and their parents would pick them up and drop them straight off. And I see them and they all look perfect, the tights, but I always kind of knew that I didn't fit in one because I'm like super short. But also, like, the girls didn't look like me, even the Black girls, they didn't look like me. They're all very fair skin, very clear skin, or they were mostly white, So, like, it was mostly predominantly white girls, but even if they were Black, they were, like, very light-skinned Black girls coming from affluent families and that kind of stuff. So I always felt like immediately, I'm not going to fit in, so I'm not even going to try to fit in. But then, as Tanae said, like, once you get in, you still got to contend with the history of ballet, which is, as a lot of people don't want to admit, has a lot of racist and sexist and patriarchal foundations to it. It's the whole idea of perfection being like all looking the same, which is, slim, slender, blonde haired, blue eye. You have to wear the pink tights because it's all about uniformity. And like, it's all about this whole idealism of what the perfect woman is supposed to look like. And I've always found like that Swan Lake in particular kind of like encapsulates that whole idea of not only just the ballet industry, but the world itself, how the world wants women to look. They want everyone to fit one ideal, and if you don't fit it, you're the black swan, you're the black sheep, you're the ugly duckling, you're the outcast, you're the one who doesn't fit in because you don't look like us. And like, your film, I think, really talks a lot about the opposites and the contradictions in the ballet industry. They want all these women to look perfect on stage. But if you go up, as your camera goes up close, if you see them sweating, that glow isn't because they're ephemeral. No, that glow is because they're sweating buckets. That glow is them being tired. That glow is them crying because their feet hurt. Their backs, their legs hurt. Like they look perfect and look symmetry because they're all expected to wear the same color tights. And one thing I will commend Karen about is like, why wouldn't they wear their own skin, especially for a story about liberation, about liberating women from an oppressive force, with his Rose Dart's character. So I appreciate her doing that. But in her saying that there's a few scenes with her and a couple of the other dancers who are white, they just don't understand the importance of all the other dancers being able to show their skin. They're complaining about sweating. I'm like, I was legit sitting in the cinema and I said, girl, you need to chill out. This isn't about you. I said that out loud. I was like, this is not about you. But then it made me think about how for a lot of white people, like, they like being in their bubble protects them from having to think about the importance of just going on stage with your skin bare. You know, they don't understand how monumental that is for people like Tanae, or even someone like Shaylin. Like, I love her character, but even for the other girls, because there's Asian girls and other Latin girls in the Core de Ballet, you know? So like but for the white girls, they're like complaining about things like sweat, and like Tanae and Shaylin are like thinking about other much more bigger issues that affect them emotionally. So talk about highlighting that and how that perhaps changed your own perspective, on the topic of not only the film itself, but the idea that Karen had for this version of Swan Lake.
Yeah, I mean, we knew, because when we were developing this, you know, it was 2020, and after the murder of George Floyd, there was so much discussion in and around the world of ballet, I think for the first time publicly, about its history of racism. And I mean, even when we were conceptualizing the project, ballet is obviously is woven into the history of ballet is racism. And so it became really important to us to try to tackle that subject alongside all of the other kind of more difficult subjects in the film with, you know, a substantive and like serious lens. And I think like everything in the film, our kind of rule was we don't get into anything unless it's something that like one of our characters is going through and experiencing. And for Tanae, the tights issue was like top of mind. And I think, you know, we really worked hard on that storyline. At first, it seemed like kind of dumb to us, not Tanae's perspective, but like, how could tights be a big deal? And of course, you learn over the course of the weeks and months it unfolded that it's a huge deal, and it's revolutionary in the context of Swan Lake. But I think also kind of what you're talking about in terms of the reaction to the other dancers, and, you know, everybody has their reasons for their reactions, but you know, all those girls posted black squares. You know.
I know it.
You know.
So,
it's like really, and I don't even, and I want to be clear that none of that is a personal critique against any of.
No, I understand what you mean completely, because I have
right, but it's like, it's so interesting what happens when, you know, a change is sort of set into motion, that you think everybody sociopolitically has like read enough infographics enough like to know that it's good and right, but it's so hard for people to deal with discomfort in an institutional context. And so it's a really rare dynamic to capture. It's kind of like everybody on the outside of institutions is like, well, why does it take so long for these places to change? And it's like, oh, watch the tight storyline. You know, it's for us, it was like an observational, emblematic storyline about these kinds of changes in institutions, and grounded, of course, in Tanae's point of view. Sorry, I've just talked forever about that.
No. I think that's like all like, you know, just sort of outlining kind of what our sort of like approach was. But also I think that like we just in our early discussions, we really were interested in like kind of, you know, Karen sort of represents a bit of an ideal, and she sort of represents a bit of the past of ballet, but we were also really interested in terms of an ensemble of like, okay, well, what does like the future look like? What is the perspective of these like young, new generation of dancers? How do they feel about all this? And, you know, I think in our casting in different ways, we tried to choose people that didn't necessarily fit the ideal of ballet, so that we could incorporate that perspective, and it would sort of organically, all of their perspectives would sort of organically sort of reveal themselves in the context of Swan Lake.
And in the series, Sipe November, who's a principal dancer there.
Yeah, I want you to see the series.
Yeah,
I'm so excited to see the series, because I'm just like,
dark-skinned, black, short South African, who was the first Black dancer to play Prince Siegfried in the company's history, which of course is a embarrassing statistic. But and he gets into that, and that in his whole storyline in the series really goes even deeper into some of these issues around race and racism. And so yeah, there's more to come.
Yeah, and Chelsea, you mentioned Karen kind of being like a representation or embodiment of the old way of things functioning in ballet. And I had that thought too, because I thought it was super ironic. And I don't even know if she may have thought about it in that moment or even like in hindsight, where she picked Swan Lake, which is one of the most well-known, or probably perhaps the most well-known ballet ever created. But then she's doing it at the end of her position as artistic director, and also to mark a 50-year career with the National Ballet of Canada. But then she has this whole concept about women represented as the swans being free from a oppressive force, a male patriarchal figure. And while she's doing that, I as I was watching the film, I'm like realizing that she realized that ballet itself embodies all of these things. You know, that the pressure of putting these girls under is the same, could be represented in Rothbard. You know, the whole structure is representing how he expects these girls to change to fit his ideal, you know, making them all dress and look alike. He did that to the swans, you know, making them all like function in extremely tiring situations, and telling them, well, you signed on the dollar line, so this is what it. But she said that line, it was like, girl, please think about what you just said. Because she's like, they ran 5K, and she's like, oh well, this is what this is what they signed up for. I'm like, technically, that's not what they signed up for. Who signs up to like burst their body in that way? But then I was thinking, like, that's another example that she put in her own place. I wondered if after the play, if after the first production, or even when it was finished, because this was over a year ago, and then seeing this film, if she had any moment of clarity where she realized, oh wait, I kind of like encourage this system my own self, because I only waited till the very end to do a change. You know, I only waited as I'm ready to walk through the door to say, how about you guys show your skin? She had 50 years to help change the system, and she didn't. And she only decided, you know, I'm going to make this change when I'm all going out through the door. And I was just thinking, as you're saying, both of you are saying, like, things have stayed the same because people have been so happy with the status quo because it benefited them. And I saw your whole film kind of encapsulating that entire concept within Swan Lake itself. And I was just thinking, Karen, I really hope you sit down with a new director and have a conversation about this. So I want for both of you not to talk about any conversations you had about how you had maybe preconceptions, not only necessarily about ballet, but your own style of filmmaking. If you realize, wait, I need to change the way I do things now because I was kind of a part of the system before. And if I want to change the system, I got to make the change now rather than when I'm leaving it, you know, or rather when I can't make a change anymore.
Damn.
Damn. That's a mic drop.
I mean, first of all, thank you for encapsulating the central allegory of the film so beautifully.
Yes. Spot on.
I don't even know if I told you this. My conversation with Karen in our last interview was about this question about whether or not she's had any reflection.
Yeah.
Did I tell you? No. So she said, yeah. So she said that when she watched the film, she thought, oh, because they restage Swan Lake every 3 years or something at the ballet because these productions cost so much and they play for like 20 years. So it'll be Karen Kane's Swan Lake for many, many years at the National Ballet of Canada. And she said to me and this interviewer that we were doing this interview that she wants to change the core so that it's not so hard. Watching the film made her realize that it's too hard. And I mean, Karen is a product of her time. And I don't say that to make excuses. I think that the context within her world, remember, like, she went to ballet school in a dorm at 8 years old, and she has been with this company her whole life. Of course, existing in the world, but existing in a very particular
It's
world.
A bubble. We'll say it's a bubble.
And I think we were surprised, actually, how frank she was about race and about her own kind of biases and what she learned. And she spoke about the shame of, you know, there were Black dancers, principal dancers, male principal dancers in the 80s and 90s who weren't allowed to dance prince roles in classical ballets, which she speaks about. I mean, she wasn't in charge at that time, but she was obviously in the company. And I think, you know, she's pretty self-reflective about how she's needed to change and grow. And at the same time, she's diversified the company a lot in terms of her hiring. So it's an evolution. It's a slow evolution. But I think, you know, I think that her efforts are serious and sincere. And I think that in terms of my own journey, I mean, the captured women of it all, the bigger question is like, do I feel responsible for systemic change in my own world? Yeah, of course. And that comes up in hiring, and that comes up in how we tell our stories and who we collaborate on telling our stories and who gets framed in our stories. Like, that's a central question to any project that we would take on. But also, larger questions about like how much is too much became big for us on this one.
We asked a lot of our crew, and and we were sort of like looking at them running 5K and then looking at our camera people running 5K with them and being like, ooh.
and our editors working so hard, and they gave of themselves for the same reason the dancers do. Like, I remember when we wrapped the film, I texted our editor, Brendan, and I was like, there's this quote. It's a quote from the film that Rob says, the choreographer, is like, I was like, I'm really reckoning with how hard I've pushed them. And then he texted me back, but I do it because I see such limitless potential in what they do, and it's this constant tension, this constant question. And I think if you're not asking that question, you're not like invested in an ethical approach. There's no easy answer though.
Yeah. It's all about balance in everything, right? It's balance in everything. Let's talk about Shaylin and that scene in the pool, because that blew that was almost like a little mini film in and of itself, because it spoke so much about who she is as a person and her dancers. And she's so vulnerable because first of all, the way your editors and you guys sequence the film, like there's things a character would say, and the sequence that would come immediately after plays off of that. So like the scene where she goes up to Rob, where she talks about her reason for being apprehensive about showing her bare legs is because she has scars, because she suffers with depression, and she's very open with that, and that manifests itself in physical ways where she cuts herself, and like she's so open about it. And then right immediately after that, you show that vulnerability of her dancing in the pool. So talk to me about talking with Shaylin and like the conversations you had with her, and about showing what you wanted to show and what she was comfortable with you showing, because as we said, it had to be a balance, but it also has to be balanced in what the subjects want you to show, what they have to be comfortable with. So talk about her in particular, because I think she's phenomenal.
Yeah, definitely. Like when we because we actually, Shay was a character that we kind of not that we cast, but we sort of knew who we were generally going to follow, and she came quite late. And I had just because she'd broken her foot and she'd been away from the company for a bit, so she'd come back for Swan Lake.
She mentioned that, and she mentioned it in such a casual throwaway line. I was like, roll back. Did you just say you broke your foot?
Yeah. So I met with her just because we were sort of trying to do our due diligence to meet with every single dancer. There's 70 dancers in the company, to meet every dancer, make sure we had chosen like who we thought would sort of represent the project the best, or what the film we were trying to make. And so and then we met Shay, and then I was like texting Sean, and I was like, oh my God, Sean, we have to have this other character. She's amazing. Like, she's gonna we just knew, like, I knew within 5 minutes of meeting her that she was going to like change the entire project. You just know. But that scene was actually really early on when we were shooting. And it's kind of interesting because I was in the pool with her, and she
had requested like an abandoned mansion
to
do the interview.
Yeah, all haunted and stuff.
Truly, she said, I would like to be interviewed, because we were like trying to find, like, with each of our subjects, and this is like shows up a bit more in the series than does the feature, but we were trying to find we wanted to sort of like represent them outside of like ballet, where in like a place they were comfortable with, or where they were like the most themselves. And then also to dance outside of ballet. We were interested in that. And so I'd asked Shay like where she wanted to shoot. Sort of, it was like a more of a formal sit down interview. It would be a long interview. We'd get into her personal history and then also do some dancing. And she was like no pause, anything, a haunted mansion. And I was like, all right, Shay, then we're going to find you a haunted mansion. And so while we were there, it was very like it was very, what's the word I'm looking for? Spontaneous. Yeah. Like we had just kind of went around and like just on the day we had sort of rented this haunted mansion, and then Shay had just shown up. We hadn't like been there before together or anything. And it was just sort of like where she felt like dancing. And then we were in the pool, and she was like, we were talking about maybe what she was going to wear when she was dancing in the pool, what she was going to like dance to. And it was actually there that I found out about the scars. So yeah, so it was like in that moment that, yeah, it's sort of like we're finding out in real time about the scars because we're seeing them as she's dancing. And then later we did the interview after that is when I asked her about them, because I'd felt like she had opened the door by talking about them in the pool. So it's kind of like, it just kind of happened really like organically and kind of unfolded. And then obviously it sort of had real world implications because it was connected to the tights and how she was feeling about it. And so those things were kind of just unfolding. And we were sort of finding out from her about them as they were happening.
And then it's like the question when we cut it was, you know, how far is too far? This is a very young person who's trusted us with something very sensitive. I mean, and so that's an example of a scene that, you know, Shay consulted on. We showed her the scene before we locked it. We worked really, really hard to make sure that it didn't feel gratuitous. Yeah. And I think, you know, what she said, we didn't include this in the film because it felt a little bit too pat, but, you know, she was like, I am not ashamed of this. And I don't want somebody who's gone through this to like not feel like they can be in the world or in this world. And so I think for us, that felt grounded and real. And I think a point of view that we respected and shared. And so, you know, that was part of our intent, including it in the film. So yeah.
Yeah, and that goes to what I was saying about these young dancers, these girls, right? And whether they're in the Core de Ballet or the principals, like they have, because they're also so complex, they also have a lot of things that they're dealing with personally, a lot of their own personal demons, a lot of trauma, you know, physical trauma and emotional and mental trauma. Like their backgrounds aren't perfect. They're who they are on stage is not who they are in real life. That's persona. That's the character they're playing. You know, on off stage, their lives are difficult. It's hard. It's like very that's where the determination, where they have to say, I have to go through with this, it to show some of the determination they have. Because one of the things that Shaylin talks about a lot, and I think it's very in line with what Tanae talks about too, is imposter syndrome, you know, of the world of ballet making you feel like you don't belong because it has these very strict ideas, you know, about these things that you have to fulfill to fit into this role. So if you think you don't look like these girls, if you don't have the ideal body type, you know, if you don't have the correct skin tone, the correct hair, because one of the things that I thought it was ironic where Karen was so adamant about the tights. One of my thoughts was, what about hair? You know, what can the girls like Tanae with natural hair? Can they show their natural hair? I'm like, if they can show off their legs, let's have them dance with their natural hair. But even in showing off their legs and their skin tone, they still have to have their hair done exactly the same way, you know? They still have to have that idea of perfection in some way, that idea of conformity in some way. And it made me think of Misty Copeland, who is one of the most well-known Black prima ballerinas. She has struggled a lot, not only with being Black, but having a very different body shape to the ideal body shape for ballerinas, you know? So when Shanae was talking about, that made me think of Misty a lot and a lot of other Black ballerinas. There's one that is from Africa. Is it Congo? I don't know, but she is very dark skinned and she had the same issue. She dances mostly in Europe. And like, it made me think of a whole, like, whether you're Black or Asian or Native American or Latina, like Shay is, there's all of these things in a society that's making these girls think they already don't fit in. But then when they go into this world of this dance, of culture that they love so much, like you have to genuinely love ballet to want to do this, they have added pressure, you know? And like your film really settles in, because I think like that's a lot of the second and early third act of the film is about settling into this idea of showing the toll that ballet takes on these dancers mentally, you know, like even Jorgita, she's been at this for her whole life, but she can't even reveal to people that she's known for years that she has an injury, you know. She's like, I have a nerve injury. And these people don't know because she has to still perform this idea of perfection, you know, and she's in pain, but she can't even let the people that she's dancing with know that she's in pain. And like, I was just like, that's insane to me. But I understand it, but it's insane that we even have to understand that because that's just the way our world works.
Mm-hmm.
It's something interesting that Seika Boye said to us, who is interviewed in the film. She talks a lot about the tights and she talks about the core. She's a dance scholar at U of T, and she used this phrase, ideal citizenry, that the ballet in its history was about projecting an ideal citizenry, you know, white, compliant, uniform. You've already said this in this conversation in a few different ways, and I think you're really hitting the nail on the head in terms of what ballet's kind of social role was in its inception. And so I think it's so interesting for us to kind of watch people in the present grapple with that history, which has obviously ugliness in it for anybody who is not outside or can't fit into that ideal, and violence in it for those who can't fit into the ideal, and yet also can be profoundly beautiful and moving and touching and do all the things that art can do. And you kind of have to like hold those things together and think about, well, how much can you change and how much can you move forward and how much can shift and how much can evolve, and then at what point does it fall apart and change and go and not be the same thing? And you know, all these questions are so rich, there's no easy answers to them, and I think that's like what makes it a good documentary subject, you know.
Yeah, I know Barbie is probably panicking, so
yeah. But we'd love to talk about the series.
But yeah, if you watch it and want to, honestly, just like listening to you sort of like interrogate the subject matter and like, just like understand it in such a sort of deep and complex way is just like so satisfying. Yeah, so anytime.
Yeah. She's like, she's like, it's all good. I'm genuinely like, the more I think about this film, the more I think about how complex art is, you know, because even like using filmmaking and documentary, one of the reasons I love speaking to filmmakers is and I kind of asked you guys already, like after you've made a project, like I always like to ask directors and filmmakers and even editors and whoever works on a film, what they have thought about what they've created and how that shapes the world that shapes the way they look at the world after, because, you know, like once you've made a project, like your perception changes, you know. I think of that project because while we are in the thing, we don't really get to see it, you know. We can't look at it in hindsight, but once we are finished, it's like then you sit back and then you realize, oh wait, I didn't even intend for this to happen, but it's there, you know. And it's always so interesting to listen to people like you talk about how you were in this space for so long and you worked your bodies to the bone, you know, and like even the two of you had to sit down and think, wait, are we asking too much of our own selves, and are we asking too much of our crew, you know, because your crew has to be going neck on neck with these girls, like learn the paces. I think I read an interview where it says they had to learn the choreography, and I'm like, that's something that they as cinematographers, they would have never had to think, you know, I'm going to be a cinematographer, which means I'm going to go and have to learn the choreography for Swan Lake, of all things. They like, now they can say, guess what? I know the choreography for Swan Lake. And, you know, but like, but it also changes the way how they get to look at their work as cinematographers. You know, it gives them a new perspective, right? So yeah, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm definitely looking forward to the series, because I know at the Q&A, one of the cinematographers said that there's a girl at the beginning where they're getting ready for the first showing where she's so sarcastic, and where she gave the letter that Rob wrote. She's like, thank you girls so much, you know, for changing the script, like for changing this choreography like a million times, you know, even up until the day before. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to see like more about those girls.
Yeah, her name is Ariel Morales. She's a great character.
Yeah, and she's a much bigger character in the series. Yeah.
Right. I'm so looking forward to her and to seeing like some of the other background people, because another thing and it's something that Jorgita as a principal dancer highlights, and I think it's important that she's the one who highlights it, is saying that the ballet wouldn't be what it is without the core. you know, because people would look at the principals and say only the principals matter, like the core is just like the background characters. Like your Gita herself saying, no, we wouldn't, or I wouldn't be who I am as a principal without the core, you know. The core makes the ballet, the core makes the structure, the story, the core makes the performance. If the core falls apart, doesn't matter, you know. And I love that she's the one who highlights that, because it's important to for her in her position to show support for the core and say everyone is equally important.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're wrapping now, Barb. Okay. No, and I always appreciate when people to get extra time for interviews, because I'm always like, more for me.
It's just so nice for somebody who really sees it and gets it after so much work. So we really appreciate all the time you put into watching the film and thinking about it.
Yeah, I had fun. Thank you so much, Shauna, Chelsea. Yay! And congratulations. I can't wait to see the series. I know the film is opening theatrical
Friday.
29th, right?
Friday, baby.
Wait, that's because it is the 21st. Listen, September has been going by so fast.
Yeah.
I know.
This year, I just like New Year's was just the other day, and all of a sudden we're speeding down towards summer. And apparently today's supposed to be the first day of fall, but it's like summer outside.
It's confusing. Yeah.
I cannot deal with this. But thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Thanks, Barb.
Thank you. Bye, Carolyn.
Thanks. Bye.